prosecution of felon gangster mafiotic negroidic, the Black Frank Gelada, a gangster judge, therefore unprosecutable, the blackish, menial, negroidic in appearance and demeanor, felon, vicious, parroting puppet, ex-district attorney Nassau County, with no private law experience, detested by all factions, in spite of this solely because of his many-year secret gangsterization and crucifixion of me, this negroidic, low, mafiotic, deadly Black Frank Gelada was then immediately and unprecedentedly and repeatedly, rapidly promoted in spite of tremendous opposition to the present position of second highest state judgeship solely through gangster computer god manipulation. As additional evidence, during the last week of my within-mentioned month-long, worse-than-a-farce Nazi court criminal trial in Nassau County Court, 1958, where dwarfed-it felon gangster parroting puppet rectum lapper sodomist Judge William Sullivan's ball of fat felon slut wife, she, as planned, sat in the front row, repeatedly stripping her overclothes and completely pulling up her dress and slip and pulling aside her old-fashioned pink bloomers in order to display her anus, her conch. She repeatedly gesticulated and whispered, "I'll give it to you to suck. Finish him." Her husband's dwarfed-it felon gangster parroting puppet rectum lapper sodomist Judge William Sullivan, flushed-faced in repeated open sodomistic displays, stuck out his tongue, wiggling it, chuckling to her. "You hangman rope gangster felon parroting puppet scum on top playboys can watch my Frankenstein eyesight television playback of this felonious lowly sodomistic display by the felon sodomist Judge William Sullivan and his lowly felon slut wife during my trial in Nassau County Court. After my worse-than-Nazi court criminal conviction, crucifixion, for years in poverty I suffered hopeless, jobless, character assassination, and isolation in this low, deadly nigger town. I was the repeat target victim of this gangster government's gangsterization and undetectable extermination attempts to shut me up forever with my secrets. Then, in December 14th to 17th, 1965, I attempted to escape this worst mongrel gangster communist country to return to the Slovenic Polish land of my forefathers. Instead, in a gangster-staged parroting puppet deadly conspiracy, I was flown from Kennedy, New York Airport at night to a small distant St. Lawrence River estuary, snowbound small airport under the guise that I was in Warsaw, Poland. Immediately, many, many things proved this to me, including the two big white asbestos shingled hangars with the large Braniff Airways signs on their sidewalls, in addition to the many blurted statements I solicited from the many CIA deadly gangsters, the assassins of me, the many, many parroting puppets all around me. I demanded an immediate flight back to Kennedy, New York Airport. Instead, I was held captive all night later in chains. I refused both all food and requests I go to sleep. Then CIA police gangsters pretending to be Polish police with no identification beat me bloodily. Later, while my return trip 707 Boeing jet airliner was being serviced for my return trip, I quickly walked into the airplane and saw a CIA gangster with a small electric hairdryer type blower pumping deadly poison nerve gas smoke into secret compartments under the ashtrays in the arms of the chairs where later I was ordered to sit in the airplane full of CIA underlings, passengers, my assassins, who giggled as they watched me dragged in chains by the airplane by the gangster CIA police gangsters. These deadly gangster CIA passengers, they pressed the frontal panel of the ashtrays in the seat arms to release the deadly poison nerve gas smoke. Indubitably, all of the others deadly CIA underling gangsters aboard this staged return flight, they all had taken the top secret poison nerve gas antidote pill, immuning them from the deadly poison nerve gas smoke. Deadly poison nerve gas smoke was sprayed at me from cigars, cigarettes, and even from ballpoint pens, also from the wig of a woman sitting next to me. Even the Swiss cheese type ice cubes were evaporating into poison nerve gas smoke in all of the free drinks. I got up and went to the rear of the airplane by the rear exit door with a large push-up handle. My Frankenstein brain thoughts broadcasting radio disclosed my intentions. Immediately, the loudspeakers screamed that the flight was over and that our airplane was already preparing to land at Kennedy, New York Airport. You hangman rope sneak gangster playboy scum on top know these facts are true, not only from taking part in such undetectable exterminations, but also you chicanerous, demented, felon, parroting puppet gangsters can watch my Frankenstein eyesight television playback of all these horrible, terrifying, deadly events. When I returned home, Joseph I. Deck, my only brother and deadly felon, murderer, and assassin spy agent against me for this gangster government, he beat me repeatedly, cursing me that I was not exterminated by all of the poison nerve gas smoke, and that I did the impossible in that I kept awake for 3 days and refused all food in order to prevent my sneak extermination. In accordance with the completely gangster computer god concocted and manipulated statutory laws, one of your gangster court's requisite duties is to automatically rehear my said appeal case, because it has been brought to your attention, you hangman rope gangsters, that my entire life was destroyed by you co-conspirators through the gangster government perjured and fabricated criminal conviction of me in order to fulfill the demands of your communist god, the worldwide mad deadly gangster computer god. You deadly parroting puppet felon gangsters already know that I have been and am an innocent primary victim and target for destruction and extermination because I am a menace to your gangster computer god, and that I am worse than defenseless without the gangster protection and control of the gangster Frankenstein earphone radio. I stand alone against you demented, deadly gangster parroting puppets, namely this worst gangster communist computer god-controlled gangster government. Before I'm exterminated by you hangman rope underlings, I demand a reply. October 21st, 1976. Francis E. Deck, Esquire. Addendum. I personally filed my maximum conviction appeal brief in 1961 with the chief clerk of the U.S. Supreme Court, Washington, D.C. The chief clerk, he knew me. He sneeringly grabbed my thick, strong, homemade appeal brief, and then he attempted to rip it up in desperation. The chief clerk of the U.S. Supreme Court ripped off the cover of my appeal brief. Miraculously, I stopped him without a deadly scene to me. Then, filing my ripped appeal brief, the felon, another co-conspirator with the 9 hangman rope gangster judges, the chief clerk, in cowardly fear, in staccato speech and gesticulation, he confessed to me, Mr. Deck, everyone is in on this one against you, even the Attorney General, namely Bobby Kennedy, younger than his very young brother Jack Kennedy, Kennedy then president, the Kennedy Playboys. Little fag Bobby was a felon, lowest, chicanerous, untouchable, parroting puppet gangster against worse than defenseless Mr. Francis E. Deck, Esquire. My quick questioning and the co-conspiring felon chief clerk explained and gave me a new and special notice form for only Mr. Francis E. Deck, Esquire, which had to be mailed to the opposition, the deadly gangster district attorney, in order to prevent the dismissal of my appeal case. Leaving quickly, I noticed in the room and hall several approaching uniformed and plainclothes beweaponed police. Later, Joseph I. Deck, my only brother, deadly villain, murderer, and secret assassin spy agent against me for this gangster government, cursed me, stating that I tricked the chief clerk of the U.S. Supreme Court and that I got out of that death trap fast. So brainwashed from birth by the computer god threshold brainwash radio parroting puppet gangster slave, if you believe in anything, forget kneeling to abide by the high holy law long enough to say one word of pray for me, for your only hope for a future. Footnote, remember, it is gangster U.S. Supreme Court written high holy law. I'll give it to you to suck. Finish him. To all judges, First and Second Appellate Division, Superior Court, New York City, Court of Appeals, Albany, New York, U.S. Supreme Court, Washington, D.C., I write demanding a rehearing of my worse than lowest deadly gangster police state criminal conviction, which appeal case was in your farce, deadly gangster ghetto communist, gangster computer god manipulated gangster court. Below I state some of the many reasons for said rehearing, plus all of my evidence the Attorney General chicanerously forwarded to the Bar Association Grievance Committee for prosecution of felon gangster mafiotic negroidic, the Black Frank Gelada, a gangster judge, therefore unprosecutable, the blackish, menial, negroidic in appearance and demeanor, felon, vicious, parroting puppet, ex-district attorney Nassau County, with no private law experience, detested by all factions, in spite of this solely because of his many-year secret gangsterization and crucifixion of me, this negroidic, low, mafiotic, deadly Black Frank Gelada was then immediately and unprecedentedly and repeatedly, rapidly promoted in spite of tremendous opposition to the present position of second highest state judgeship solely through gangster computer god manipulation. As additional evidence, during the last week of my within-mentioned month-long, worse-than-a-farce Nazi court criminal trial in Nassau County Court, 1958, where dwarfed-it felon gangster parroting puppet rectum lapper sodomist Judge William Sullivan's ball of fat felon slut wife, she, as planned, sat in the front row, repeatedly stripping her overclothes and completely pulling up her dress and slip and pulling aside her old-fashioned pink bloomers in order to display her anus, her conch. She repeatedly gesticulated and whispered, I'll give it to you to suck. Finish him. Her husband's dwarfed-it felon gangster parroting puppet rectum lapper sodomist.
Good morning. Good evening. Good afternoon. Good, a little bit later than usual, huh? Had some technical difficulties I was trying to smooth out. One of the fancier features I was trying to add, which is not added for today's stream, but will be added in future streams. I don't know how practical it is. I can't say that it'll remain part of the stream, but it'll, at the very least, it'll be very funny. So people have talked about, well, what about a call-in? What about, in fact, someone even said, what about a ham radio call-in? Well, that'd be difficult to do, just, because of, broadcasting back and forth. I don't know. I guess it's possible. One thing I thought would be kind of funny in the meantime, though, is I have a very old CW reader. In other words, a Morse code reader. And it does video out like old school, like an NES Nintendo would hook up to a TV video out. And it works, kind of. Like, it works okay. For being as old as it is, it works okay. I hooked it up today. And the tricky thing is, if I hook this up and I have like a little screen, like the video in, I make it like a window on the stream here, to where you could like Morse code messages onto the into the stream, which would be kind of funny, right? It'd be pretty funny. The side effect, the bad part of that is obviously, well, first of all, not a lot of people are going to be able to do that, but it is what it is. Maybe the elite few will be able to do that. But the other part of that is this thing's so kind of janky that even if like you tuned to the right frequency, like let's say I'm trying to like make this thing decode CW, and I hear some beeping, beep 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 beep. I can tune in there, and then I hook up the reader. Even if I'm right on frequency, it might not pick up on it until you go a little bit north or south of that frequency, or it has to get the tone exactly right before it'll start reading. And if it's noisy, there's a problem. And so even when you're not just doing something weird like this, where potentially, well, basically what I would do is I'd say, here's a frequency. If you send Morse code on this frequency, then it'll maybe pop up on this screen. And I guess that's the best I can do, is like it'll maybe pop up on that screen. So that's probably we'll at least try that out. It'll be kind of funny. We'll at least try that out. And if I have the bandwidth for it, I'll even rather than pull the audio from my antenna, I'll pull the audio from that web SDR in Utah, which has a pretty good antenna and covers. I mean, it's pretty. If you can't hit that antenna, then why are you even trying? Do you even ham, bro? Do you even fucking ham at that point? If you can't, I mean, come on, bro. So that's one thing I played around a little bit today, and couldn't get it to work exactly right. But it did work. It worked a little bit. It did work a little bit. In fact, let me bring up some video. I was capturing some video, testing it out, and just so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Let's see here. I'm going to mute it so you don't hear a bunch of beeping. Yeah. So, I'll fast forward it, see if it actually picks up on anybody. It was tricky. It was tricky to get it to actually start reading. There we go. There was someone. Kevin, KT5V. So, yeah, it very, very... hit or miss, very hit or miss. Every once in a while, it'll get going. You've got it. Oh, there we go. K2 QB David. Yeah, every once in a while, it'll catch on. It'll just start reading it, no problem. But yeah, it'll be kind of funny. Have it just like in the corner somewhere. I can only imagine what you guys will send. Now, another thing we could do, because I've been thinking, like, how do we send secret messages? And there's a section in book 2, soon to come out, book 2 of Day of the Rope, where they talk about sending secret messages using a mixture of old technology and new technology. Now, I don't want to quite spill the beans yet, but I will be implementing secret messages into the stream that uses old technology and new technology, but at the same time does not require like old equipment. Like you're not going to need some 1930s radio show decoder ring in order to hear or see the secret messages. You will have the ability to easily, once you figure out the secret, acquire these secret messages. So anyway, I've been basically not online for the last 24 hours or so. So I don't really know what the hell's going on. I was hoping that the world wouldn't just collapse in my absence. I'm assuming everything's fine. I don't see any fires outside or, you know, flashes of light or hear any explosions or rumblings. Actually, there are. I kind of wonder. There must be like a mine close by or something, because there are weird, unexplained rumblings out here that were kind of unnerving at first. The first couple times I heard it, I was like, what is that? That sounds like something's being drilled underneath the bunker, deep below the Earth's crust. And I've just learned to live with it. So hopefully it's nothing too crazy. But there are weird, unexplained rumbling sounds out here. And that's a normal thing, apparently. So, hope you guys are having a fantastic time out there in computer or phone or tablet land. Enjoying my coffee. Trying to wake up. So, in terms of the schedule, moving forward, this is, remember when I talk about days, this today is considered Tuesday in the way that I'm talking about it. Now, it's a little later than I would normally do. Usually, I'd be trying to have the stream going by, well, you know, about an hour and a half ago. You know, like that's about an hour and a half ago. So whatever time it is for you, you do the math. So this would be Tuesday night. Now, here's what I'm thinking. And I'll take a look at chat and see if you guys, what you guys think of this. So, I want to do the regular streams. And I want to do it, I was thinking 3 nights a week would be good. Because 3 nights is still pretty regular. You know, it's still going to be like at least 9 hours, right? Or like in the ballpark, right? But I'll still have time to work on the other videos, like the Simpsons stuff and things like that, right? And books and other stuff, right? So I was thinking 3 nights a week sounds about right for me. And I was thinking Tuesday, Thursday, and then Saturday. So kind of like a not every day kind of a thing, but every other day almost, you know, with a little bit of a lag on the weekend there. You know, what do you guys think? Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Everyone in chat seems so far so good. Everyone seems like they are down with that. Send out a Trovo notification, someone says. I don't know how to do that. Maybe there's something I can do. I'm hitting all the Trovo buttons. What does this one do? Well, there's boost buttons. I don't think that's notification. I don't know what this does. Well, that's some weird video game. You have to manually send it out. Yeah, I'm not seeing, at least not in this screen. So, someone says Devin is a ginger. I am not a ginger. I have ginger genes. There are definite ginger genes in my gene pool. There are gingers in my family. But I am not a ginger. I have a soul. I have a soul. But yeah, the ginger DNA is strong in my family. We have a lot of translucent people in my family. All right. So, one thing I did see, one story I did see. Excuse me. One story I did see before going to bed yesterday, or I don't know. My days are still kind of weird. It's hard to describe which day I'm talking about. But I guess a handful of hours ago, one of these stories that I saw was that story. Remember that kid? That kid that turned... Is this... There we go. This kid. This kid that is being celebrated for turning in his father, who wasn't even inside the Capitol, turns out, by the way. His dad wasn't even in the Capitol. His dad was just at the Capitol thing. And it's weird how they're parading this kid around. Well, it's not weird if you know what they're doing. But it's I guess rather, it's obvious what they're doing by parading this kid around as a hero. And showing this kid as like, this is what you need to do. You need to rat out your parents. If your parents are, you know, white nationalists, insurrectionists, or whatever the term that they're using right now, if your parents are one of these people, well then, you know, you need to tell the authorities. You need to rat them out. And aside from this, like here, let me see if I can bring this up. Aside from this embarrassing mess, if you look closely at his room. Oh, look, there's a Hello Kitty, water dispenser, some faggy figurines over there, some more faggy figurines on that shelf, and a literal meme of a body pillow. He's got a fucking body pillow. And people have said, oh, that's probably his sister's room. Probably not. Don't lie to yourself. Probably not. I mean, based on what we know about this guy, probably not. And so yeah, anyway, that's not even what I'm talking about. So this guy, if you can call him that, who is doing his 15 minutes of fame for turning in his dad for being a Trump supporter. I mean, that's essentially what he's doing. His dad has been arrested by the FBI simply because he showed up to he wasn't, like I said, he wasn't even inside the Capitol. His son made some accusations which are probably overblown and maybe not even accurate at all, about his dad was like talking about doing something big and blah, blah. In other words, his dad was probably just being a boomer and blowing off some steam about losing the election, and his faggot son turned him in. And I discovered that this guy has a GoFundMe. He has a GoFundMe. Now, remember I talked about earlier how we don't have any money, how we're small, we're insignificant, we're a subset of a subset, maybe of a subset, and we don't have big donors, and these guys have money just coming out of their assholes. And one of the reasons why they have money just coming out of their assholes is when they start GoFundMes, GoFundMe doesn't shut them down because GoFundMe is also on their side. And I'm going to look it up here. I don't want to be incorrect. I don't want to be inaccurate about how much money this kid has raised for ratting his dad out to the authorities for being a Trump supporter. Oh, let's take a look here. Oh, this picture will convince you that that's not his sister's room, by the way. This picture will hopefully convince those that were telling me on Gab and on Twitter, oh, that's his sister's room. That's his sister's room. There's no way. There's no way that's his room. You're You're just being an asshole. You look like an idiot, because that's his sister's room. All right, well, if you think that's his sister's room, let's take a look at this photo. This is a photo he chose. This is a photo he chose for himself. So there we go. There we are. Still think that's his sister's room? You still think that's not his Hello Kitty water dispenser? Not his anime body pillow? Not his gay figurines on the shelves? You still think that? You still think that's his sister's room? You know, something I've noticed, I saw this mostly on Instagram. There's a lot of people, the people that follow me, which is this what's surprising, that are just in denial of just some basic stuff, like how bad it is. You know, basic stuff like, oh, there's no way that this kid who ratted out his dad would have a Hello Kitty water dispenser in his room. You know, just basic stuff where it's like, if you're not willing to see that this faggot would have a Hello Kitty water dispenser in his room, just precisely how much of this you think is fake. You know, like, how much of this are you not buying? Are you not swallowing because you're in denial of how bad it is? If you can't even fathom that this faggot right here would have all that gay shit in his room. Like, I saw that, and I was like, oh, yeah, that adds up. That figures, right? There's a lot of people who didn't think that. They thought, oh, that has to be his sister's room. There's no way that this guy right here, that faggot right there, could possibly be that much of a faggot. No, he is. He's that much of a faggot. And he's almost raised $200,000. He's almost raised $200,000. So I just want to point that out. This is part of the campaign to let kids know, if you turn your parents in, for thought crimes, not only will you get your face on television, and they'll tell you how brave you are, how courageous you are, and they'll pass you around to all the different networks and praise you, give you all that praise that you want. You'll also get rich. Not unlike the way that ISIS might give money to the family of a suicide bomber. Right? Hey, act like a little terrorist and you'll get paid. I wouldn't be surprised if this guy exceeds his goal of $200,000. I mean, look, this screenshot, it shows he got $25 15 minutes ago. The money's still rolling in. The money is still rolling in. And GoFundMe's not going to shut this down. You know, if you start a GoFundMe just to help someone's legal fees, this guy doesn't even have legal fees. He's saying, oh, it's for my college fund. Yeah, okay. Okay. Well, there's no enforcement of that. If we give you $200,000 and you spend it all on coke, there's nothing that happens to you. Really kind of doubting that that's all going to go towards your so-called college fund. All right. But this guy can just say, I need college, and, you know, my parents aren't going to pay for my college anymore because I ratted them out to the Stasi. I ratted them out to the commies. And so now I need your help. I need $200,000 $200,000 for my shitty art school. Well, I'll learn how to be more of a communist. So there you go. That's your reward. That's what happens. You get as someone said, snitches get riches. You get paid. You get paid for turning on your parents. And look, obviously not every one of the people that does this is going to end up getting $200,000. That's not the point. The point is that they're going to advertise it, that's what happens. People are going to see this. There's lots of teenagers who don't like their parents. When I was a teenager, I wouldn't have ratted my parents out for something like that. But there was, it'd be tempting at least if I was mad at them. And I thought, well, not only do I get to come out the hero, but I get $200,000, it would have been tempting, right? And I was a relatively not shitty kid. There's a lot of fucking shitty kids out there. Now you can say, and I know a lot of people are thinking this, well, it's the parents' fault, right? They deserve it. If they raise a kid like that and they don't, there's no alarm bells going off in their head when the kid has a Hello Kitty water dispenser and all these gay figurines in his room and the anime body pillow, like, if those weren't enough warning signs that your kid requires attention immediately to prevent him from becoming what we're looking at here on the screen. I mean, the kid's obviously on the way to chopping his genitals off. I mean, that's like one psychiatrist meeting. He's one psychiatrist meeting away from chopping his fucking dick and balls off. And so you can say to the parents, well, I mean, look, you created this fucking monster. You created this monster. And you wouldn't be entirely wrong. You wouldn't be entirely wrong. But this is going to become more and more normal. This is going to become very normal. And not only is this kid going to be rewarded in the immediate aftermath of all of this, but he's going to learn the lesson that's better than any lesson he's going to learn from his college if he spends this on college, is that if you jerk the state off, you get rewarded. And so this is going to change the way this kid interfaces with the world. He's going to be a slave to the state until the day he dies. And that is what's happening right now. And that's part of again, I've noticed there's some people that are taking the genocide stream a little hard. I want to reiterate, it's not going to start tomorrow. It's not going to start for quite some time. But these are the steps that lead up to it. These are absolutely the steps that lead up to it. And I feel like it won't happen really until people like this guy, here, when this guy is the kind of guy that's getting elected to office. So it's coming. How old is he? He's probably like 18, 19. I mean, they're using his name everywhere, so I don't think he's underage. They're just saying he's a teen. But he's also going on the air without his parents' permission and stuff. So he's got to be 18. So we got a few years before this brand of communist is old enough to wield the kind of power that will ultimately be catastrophic for us. But it's coming. It's coming. It's on the way. Okay, let me take a look here at chat. Conservatives whine about black mothers being the most aggressive aborters. Yeah. That's maybe a conversation for another time, but I know what you're getting at. It doesn't change the fact that if you have to have principles. Let's talk about this a little bit. you have to have principles. It's kind of what I was saying about how as the West gets more feminized, men stop making decisions based on principles. You know, and women really never did. Women make a lot of decisions just based on what is good for me now. What increases my perception of safety, and what emotionally feels good right now. And they're not governed by a set of immovable principles or ethics or whatever you want to call it. There's no internal constitution that prevents them from making decisions that, while they might benefit them in the short term, or maybe it doesn't, but it appears to, they are prevented from making that decision because of a set of ethics, a set of written in stone commandments, or whatever you want to call it, that governs what they can and can't do. And I see a lot of people, a lot of men, kind of leaning into that, where they say, well, I'm pro-life, but if, I guess I like the concept or whatever, but if you look at who's doing all the aborting, is that really such a bad thing? And the answer is yes, because it doesn't matter who's doing the aborting. You got to have principles. You have to have ethics. You have to have things that you won't bend on just because you think that there's some weasel way that it works out for you, right? You have to, because the whole point of abortion being a problem is it devalues human life. It desanctifies human life as something more than just the life of an insect. As they're trying to turn us into insect people, we need to prevent our lives from just being as valuable as that of an insect. And so when you start to bend the rules a little bit because you think, well, statistically, if there wasn't abortion, there'd be this many more black people or whatever. First of all, there wouldn't be, because you got to remember, a lot of these people are using abortion as birth control. And if they didn't have easy access to abortion, would they really be using it for birth control anymore? Probably not. Probably not. And there's other ways you can. I mean, look, if that's what you want to do, if you want to decrease birth rates in other groups that are in opposition to us, there's ways of doing that without falling for the desanctification of life and bending your personal ethics as a means to an end. So that's the way I feel about it. Let's take a look at that chat here. Margaret Sanger founded Planned Parenthood. Yep. She was a eugenicist. And that was the point of Planned Parenthood, right? Was to limit the population of blacks. And you could argue maybe they kind of accomplished what they set out to do. And I do agree. Look, conservatives try to make that argument to get rid of abortion is stupid. Like everything they do, all of their arguments are stupid. That's why they fail, because they try to play into the leftist game, but they're not leftists. So like the leftist, trying to use the leftist viewpoint to reason your way out of the leftist viewpoint is just shows you how out of touch they are. They don't understand that you can't do that. If you're trying to say that the leftist worldview is wrong, why are you trying to use the leftist worldview to convince them that? If you try to say, oh no, like Margaret Sanger was a racist, she was trying to exterminate the blacks, and so that's why you shouldn't like abortion, because abortion's racist. It's stupid, because you're trying to play into the leftist worldview, the race victimization narrative, to convince them of your anti-abortion viewpoint. But conservatives do that all the time. Why? Because right when it comes right down to it, they're afraid of saying what they think. They're afraid of just saying what they think. And so they have to dress it up with fake leftist talking points in order to say what they think, because they're ashamed of what they think. A lot of conservatives, they are racist. You know, they see a lot of the same things that you and I see. It's just they're ashamed of it. They're ashamed of it. Like when they recognize patterns between groups, and they see these same patterns that you and I see, rather than saying to themselves and others around them, look, I've recognized these patterns. And while these patterns bring up some uncomfortable issues and might not be the most polite things to talk about, that is reality. And this is something that we need to tackle because we live in reality. Rather than do that, they see these patterns and they are ashamed of seeing these patterns. Because why? Because they've bought into the leftist, the whole leftist worldview, the communist worldview that they claim to want to fight against. They accept it. They accept it. That's why they always work within it to try to, move the envelope, which is never going to happen because they've already lost. They've already accepted the communist argument before they even go in. And because they accept the communist worldview, they have to accept that by noticing these things, they're an evil, bigoted racist. They've already internalized the communist worldview. And so when they see stuff like these patterns, for example, the disparity in crime statistics, they are ashamed of noticing this reality. And so they have to dress it up with some gay fucking smoke screen to hide what they feel is their bigotry. Because they're ashamed and embarrassed by their own bigotry. And the same thing goes for the so-called conservative politicians, only it's a little bit worse because they don't even see the patterns, a lot of these guys, right? They're ashamed and embarrassed by your bigotry. They're not even seeing the world and noticing these inconvenient truths. They're just looking at you like you're the asshole. And so they don't have to fool themselves by making these arguments that accepts the communist worldview. They just have to fool you into thinking that they're addressing your bigoted hate issue, your racist problem or whatever. When in reality, they just think they need to outlive you. Like, well, if we can just keep these people thinking that eventually, yes, we will tackle immigration, we'll outlive these old-fashioned racists and they'll die off. And then there won't be these outdated, obsolete bigots will be gone. And we can implement what we want to do. As long as they think that we're bigots just like them. As long as they think that we're racist just like them. So that's the problem with the weak conservative. The weak conservative that like I said, a lot of these guys see the same reality that you see. I mean, look, everyone sees the same reality that you see, right? Everyone does, because it's reality. So everyone sees it. But the conservative, while they are still tricking themselves, while they are still self-deceiving, are having to at least admit, even if it's privately, even if it's with shame, even if it's something they would never, ever, ever admit, they are not able to self-deceive at the same level that the communist is. You know, the communists, when faced with statistical information that you can't dispute, will still not believe reality. Because the communist mind is just, it's just a Swiss cheese of platitudes. But the conservative, at least, well, I mean, they recognize the problems. They're just afraid to admit it. So they have to come up with all these fucking gay reasons why the communist is wrong, but really they're right because we're using their worldview to tell them why they're wrong. Hopefully that makes sense. Take a look here. Someone says, put them on a free cruise to Africa, give them a box of powdered milk and a machete, tell them good luck. Well, if you're talking about, you know, one of the things that, I mean, look, we've talked about this before. Lincoln, part of his Emancipation Proclamation, and he said this publicly, there's a record of him saying this, that it was not intended to mix whites and blacks together as equals in the United States. It was never intended for that. He supported what they called Negro colonization, which is what happened when Liberia was founded, where they basically, I mean, they got a bunch of old slaves, stuck them on boats, and sent them to Africa, and the slaves that arrived in Africa created Liberia, or what is Liberia today. So they had already done that in a small degree. And Lincoln's plan, at least according to him, was he would pack a lot of these ex-slaves onto boats and send them back to where they came from. And that never happened, obviously. Could that still happen? Look, here's the problem. There's a lot of things that would make sense logistically and every other way. But they're still not going to happen. They're still fantasy solutions. You know, because look, you could say, look, we did the math and we've discovered the budgetary impact that the average black person has on the economy or just on the budget. You know, like what does it cost? Because I know it's a loss. It's not a gain. People have done the math before. And by the end of their lives, and maybe I could find this. Funny enough, I think this is something Vox Day covered at one point on his blog and made a graph. So let me see. Maybe I can find the graph that he did. Race budget impact. Because it's not a small number. Because you got to remember, all right, I don't see it right off the bat here. So I might be getting these numbers slightly wrong, but it's somewhere in the neighborhood of blacks, by the time they die, end up costing the society something around $250,000 a piece. Because if you add up their tax contribution, like if you get all the black people in the United States and you add up their total tax contribution, and then you add up all the costs that are associated with black people. So whether that's EBT cards, whether that's just welfare in general, whether it's all these grant programs, whether it's like the Platinum Plan had Trump been elected, whether it's, you know, all this stuff. And we're just talking about taxpayer money. We're not even talking about when Bank of America gives hundreds of millions of dollars to BLM. We're just talking about strictly government money. By the time a black person dies, if you average all this out, this is every black person, by the way, too. This isn't just like some. This is averaged out. So every black person at the time of their death is a deficit of somewhere in the neighborhood of $250,000. So every black person ends up costing America $250,000. So when you're walking around and you see a black person, every black person, not just every black person you see walking around, just know America is paying $250,000 for the privilege of having that black person in your society. And that can't, whether you're talking about a black person that's in jail, that's incarcerated, that's part of the math, obviously, how much it costs to keep all these people incarcerated, how much it costs. And look, it's probably even more expensive if you calculate some of the societal costs. This is just economic. The economic impact every black person has on America is negative $250,000 in that neighborhood. So you could say, look, we'll give you $250,000 cash if you go to Africa. Maybe we can work out some deal. And like, there are African countries that would like to have these people there, because in comparison to what they've got going on over there, the American blacks are going to be more educated, and in some instances even higher IQ, right? Because the European the European admixture you see in African Americans. So you could work out a deal, and it would make total sense for really everybody. There'd be no hate, there'd be no violence. There'd be a lot of black people, I think, that would go for that, why wouldn't you? Talk a big game about how you're being oppressed by whitey. Okay, well then take $250,000 and go live in Wakanda. If every one of you is given $250,000 and you still can't make Wakanda, that would be embarrassing, but that's your problem. When the Europeans came to this continent, they didn't have the equivalent of $250,000 apiece. Not even close. So if we're sending you guys all there, and a family of 4 has $1 million, you should be able to make shit happen. It doesn't matter that the prices, obviously, of everything would skyrocket as soon as you started showing up, because everyone would have all this money. You couldn't skyrocket that much. At a certain point, the prices would level out. You'd be able to build your little Wakanda across the ocean. And we would be able to wash our hands and declare white guilt is over officially. You got your reparations. We returned you to your homeland. And problem solved, right? But you'd never be able to do that, because everyone knows, including them, it would be a disaster. They would all show up with their $250,000. They'd spend it on worthless shit, and then it would just be another shitty country. It'd be like a country version of like a poor black family winning the lottery and being worse off than they were when they started a year later. You'd have an entire country that looked like that. You would just have this wasteland. And maybe a few of the smarter ones would accumulate most of the wealth, and you'd have like warlords and shit like that. But everyone knows it'd be a fucking nightmare. It would not be Wakanda. And then the white guilt would continue. It would still be, oh, you evil white people, you tricked us. You tricked us with your money to go, and you tricked us from, it would never end. It would still be your fault, even though it was totally voluntary. And it wouldn't matter, because like I said, it's all moot anyway, because you can't even get a politician that's willing to point out the problem, let alone start coming up with solutions. You can't even get a politician to mention the crime statistics that we're talking about here. They won't even talk about it. They won't even bring it up. And in fact, if you're a pundit and you're mainstream and you bring it up, they'll destroy you. Bill O'Reilly might not be super based or whatever, but he would bring up this stuff, and that's part of why they got rid of him. Because he was from a generation, he was still old enough to where you could talk about that stuff. And he was outdated. He had to go. Again, like I said, not that he was like some super based guy or anything like that. So that's the problem. Is it's not that there are political. When I say there's no political solution, there's tons of political solutions. It's just that there's no political will to accomplish the political solutions. Zero. You wouldn't find that plan I just described of self-deportation. It's totally voluntary. It fiscally makes sense. There's literally nothing wrong with it. Like, there's no evil being done to anyone. It's addressing a problem. And that is really, it's difficult to say that anyone's being harmed here. But you would never even be able to entertain this solution. Ever. I mean, I couldn't even talk about this solution on YouTube, probably, without being deplatformed. You can't even talk about this stuff. So it's not that there aren't political solutions. It's just that there aren't political solutions. We're in an environment now where you don't have any choice. You can present political solutions to these problems all day long. But it doesn't matter if you don't have political representation. We have zero political representation. Who do you have in Washington that sees the world the way that you do? Or if they do, they aren't completely cocked or subverted or something like that. You don't have any political representation. You just don't. You really don't. And that's a hard thing for the founding stock of this country to come to grips with. Because you think to yourself, well, hold on now. We're the descendants of the founding fathers. We are literally the people that the Constitution and these other founding documents explicitly are saying that this country is created to provide a home to. How is it that we wouldn't have political representation? And yet all these foreigners, all these groups that come from around the world and start to drink our honey, how is it they have political representation? Well, it's a complicated thing, but that's the reality right now. You have no representation. There's no one even kind of close to based, quote unquote. All this embarrassing, cringe fucking groveling over Trump. It's pathetic. It's fucking pathetic. Trump wasn't even close to someone that was going to solve any of these problems. He was making them worse. But because people have no representation, and Trump at least pisses off the people that are trying to kill you, you have a lot of people that are simping hard for Trump. And guess what? He's not going to fuck you, dude. Well, I mean, he's going to fuck you, but not the way you want. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing all the Trump simping that's been going on the last few years because of people that are that desperate and that in denial of the situation that we're in right now. It's fucking pathetic. Let me take a look here. What happened to Rand Paul? Did he break after his neighbor beat the shit out of him? Well, Rand Paul is just like a more establishment version of his father. There's a little bit more. I mean, he's a little less of a bitch than the average, obviously. But he doesn't represent you. You think Rand Paul? What if you walk? Even if it was a private, behind closed doors room. If you walked up to Rand Paul and you said, "I have this plan," and you threw down a manila envelope onto the table and you said, "All right, so what we do is we give all the black people $250,000 to go to Africa." Like, you wouldn't even be able to get that sentence out of your mouth before he would leave. Like, you couldn't even have that conversation. I don't think as an intellectual pursuit. Like, you couldn't even just talk about it hypothetically. These people are so programmed to react negatively to anything like that, that you would never even be able to discuss it hypothetically, or what the merits might be. Like, he would, if it's so awful, you would think that he'd be able to come up with all kinds of reasons why you shouldn't do that. But the fact of the matter is, you can't really. It's voluntary. The money part of it every part of it makes sense, but it wouldn't. They still wouldn't discuss it. Rand Paul is just like he's a libertarian. He's a libertarian. And libertarians have a real hard problem. Their devotion to the individual makes it impossible for them to see the interests of groups in any kind of meaningful way. And in fact, they're allergic to group interests in a lot of ways. If you start talking about group interests, they instantly call you a communist. Oh, what are you, a communist? In the same way that Trump supporters, if you say bad things about how Trump is literally a weak, cowardly traitor, which he is, anyone that supports him is kind of a faggot and no different than an e-thoughts simp sending his little simp dollars and please notice me, even though she's disgusted with your existence. Literally the exact same with Trump. Literally the same dynamic. Literally the same dynamic. Exactly the same dynamic. It's true. Anyway, I derailed myself because it's such a perfect metaphor. Like, there's no difference. There's no difference between a lot of these people sucking up to Trump, who throws them under the bus all the time, never represents anything that they want to do. But because he lets a nipple pop out every once in a while, they're just like, oh, and they're just throwing their fucking beta bucks at him. When really they disgust him. He's disgusted by these people. He throws them under the bus, and like abused little simps, they love him for it. They make excuses for him, like literally like a battered wife. Like there's no difference. So it's really amusing when these same people talk shit about simps and e-thoughts, because it's like, what are you? Like, really, what are you? How are you different? How are you any different? In fact, it's kind of worse, because at least with these guys giving titty streamers some money, that doesn't really affect me that much. Not as much as when you simp for this guy. That fucks us all over. You could say that the guy's giving money to the titty streamers, it's fucking us all over too, because it's fucking up society. But you're fucking us up worse when you're simping for a cowardly Zionist fucking cuck. Traitor. It's a little bigger, it's a much bigger deal when you're jacking off to that porn. What do you think about the current short squeeze on the games? See, I told you I was out out of commission for the last 24 hours. I just barely saw something about that when I was getting the stream ready. Now, so my understanding is, and I don't know if this is right, because I just skimmed through some of this stuff because there was like a million threads going on poll and some other stuff, and I was just like, all right, this is something I should dig deeper in, but I didn't really have the time. My understanding is there's some hedge fund that was shorting GameStop stock. So without getting too complicated, what that means is they're basically betting, because this is the problem with the stock market. Like, as much as I've said, generational wealth is a problem, usury is a problem, all this speculation is also a problem. And again, I don't have a solution for it. I'm just saying the price of commodities and stocks and everything like that just becoming like this big casino for the ultra rich is also a problem, but whatever. So you can bet that the GameStop stock is gonna crash. You can see people short selling or shorting like Bitcoin. If you think the market's gonna go down, you're essentially borrowing. You're just betting it's going to go down. You're betting it's going to go down. And apparently, some people on Reddit, of all places, organized a pump of the GameStop stock, so that when this hedge fund, which I don't remember the name of, I'd have to look at. I saw Jewish last names. I think they're Cohens. The people that run it. I mean, look, that could be any of them, right? But these people on Reddit, they knew that short was taking place, so they pumped it. They artificially drove the price up of the GameStop stock, and apparently it's wreaking havoc on the market because this hedge fund dropped billions with a B, billions of dollars into this short, and so people are freaking out. But here's the funny thing. The fact that there's someone crowdsourcing market manipulation is actually kind of awesome, because this kind of shit happens all the time. It's usually just one rich guy with enough money to manipulate the market, right? Like if you're George Soros, which in fact he's done that. He's manipulated. A lot of his money came from manipulating currency markets, doing the same kind of a thing, right? Where you can crash different currencies and then you buy them when they're low, and then you raise demand for that currency and you get rich. I mean, all the speculative stuff that you can do, whether it's currencies, commodities, or stocks or whatever, it's just gambling. It's just gambling. And you could even say, Bitcoin and stuff like that. It's gambling. If you think of it in terms of Bitcoin, if you could manipulate the Bitcoin price, which whales can do, if you have enough Bitcoin, you can manipulate the price. You can make a pretty penny on that by selling a shitload, dumping the fucking market, and then buying back into it. Or that's what the Rothschilds did. All right, remember? See, this is what I'm saying. All these problems of our financial world are caused by all these systems that are specifically designed to keep the rich rich. And the Rothschilds, the way that they got a substantial part of their fortune was they crashed the London stock exchange, because they led people to believe that Napoleon had defeated Duke Wellington. And so when the fake news that came to London that they'd been defeated, the whole stock market was crashing. And the Rothschilds also artificially helped that by liquidating some of their stocks. And then once the market was sufficiently low enough, they used agents so that you wouldn't know it was the Rothschilds buying up all the stocks, to then buy up all these cheap stocks. And by the time people figured out what the fuck was going on and that Duke Wellington had actually won and that Napoleon had been defeated, you know, the Rothschilds already owned like half the fucking stock market. So they got super fucking rich when the prices came back up. So that's all this stuff is. So this is just an instance of, first one I'm aware of, where this manipulation was crowdsourced, where it was actually manipulation done by just normal people. And of course, they're already the rich people who lost lots of money, who are in the process of losing lots of money. And I don't know what kind of repercussions this is going to have to the rest of the market, but they already are tattling to the SEC, the same organization that's supposed to put a lot of these guys in jail, quite frankly. And the SEC is trying to think of ways that they can put the people who crowdsource the manipulation into jail. Because they fucked with the rich people. And like I said, we live in a society where there is not equal protection under the law. There's not equal enforcement of the law. The rich, it's designed specifically to favor the rich, wealthy, big money families. And if you fuck one of those families out of billions of dollars, you better believe that the system's going to come at you like a ton of bricks. So we'll see how this all unfolds. I'm not sure exactly. Like I said, I didn't have time to research that hedge fund or the exact numbers or how this could have ripple effects across the larger landscape. But it's certainly the way, at least from what I was able to read, which could be wrong. It looked pretty funny. It looked like it looked as though. But here's the thing: the rich people, they never lose. So this might be a speed bump for some rich people. They're never going to lose. I mean, if nothing else, they'll get bailed out. They always get bailed out. So even if you think that you bankrupted a hedge fund run by Cohens, you didn't hurt the Cohens. They'll get their money. One way or another, they'll get their money back. They always do. Which is why all this big high roller casino stuff has to stop, because it'd be one thing if they actually had to pay the house when they lost. When the house wins, they had to fucking pay up. But that literally never happens. That literally never happens. Because every time they lose, they just take money from you and refill their accounts. Cohens must get paid. It would be a sin otherwise. Exactly. They'll get their money. Just watch. These Cohens are not going to be in the poorhouse. That's not possible. And in fact, they might put some of these Redditors in jail. Look for that. They might want to send a message that, look, you don't fuck with the system. You fuck with the system, we fuck with you. Very good chance that the Redditors go to jail, or some of them do. Judas turned on Jesus for less money than Jackson Reffitt got. Any ideas on how to vetting the glowies out of your community building? I'm looking forward to illegal CWs being on your stream. Well, you certainly want to have a license. I'm not suggesting that you break the law to communicate to my CW reader. You certainly want to be within the law when you do that. But yeah, I mean, what that tranny traitor son got is more than what Judas got for turning in Jesus. And it's part of the campaign. It's part of the tour, the publicity tour that they're doing to promote the idea of turning in your parents. There's going to be more. This is just one guy. They'll do more of these. This is going to be normal. It's going to be so normal that some parents are going to be afraid of their children. Because that's really a big part of why they want to do this. Is we talked about before how the right in some ways, not to be a dick. We're waiting for some of the boomers to die off, so that the power shifts into the hands of people who have a more accurate read on the universe, right? Well, in the same way, the left is also kind of waiting for their new crop of, like the Zoomer communists. The Zoomer communists that think it's totally normal to chop off your balls, and that there's like a billion fucking genders, like all this stuff, right? All this stuff that maybe the older leftists they pay lip service to because they're afraid. They don't want they don't want to disagree. They don't want to be called a Nazi, right? So they kind of pay lip service to it, but deep down they're not really that fucking crazy as like the Zoomer communists. So they want they can wait till this older generation dies off. That's one option, and I think they're probably still going to do that anyway. But the other option, or at least something that helps that option along, is you don't have to wait as long if the older generation is kept in check by being in literal fear of their children. If they're secretly based, we'll just say, but they're too cowardly, they're too much of a pussy to actually say it in public, they're going to be even more of a pussy if they won't say it in private either, if their children they think will turn them into the authorities by having these wrong ideas. And you're already seeing some of this stuff happen, right? Like I don't remember if it was New Zealand or Australia, but in one of those two countries, or maybe it was Ireland. I don't remember. I actually don't remember. There was some country in the Anglosphere that was floating the idea of, it might have been Ireland actually. I think Dave Cullen might have been the one I heard this from, where they want to ban even discussions that are anti-mask, as an example, at home, and that if you talk about anything that goes against the narrative, or I think hate speech was rolled up into this. I forget. I don't remember the exact context of this, but it was being discussed as a solution that, hey, if we find out that you're saying hate speech in your home, you'll be legally liable. We can throw you in jail for that. And so that's the kind of thing that's where we're headed. And with the surveillance state utilizing all of these new technologies, where the fact, people talk about, obviously, oh, your phone has a microphone on it, it has a camera on it, they can activate. Well, yeah, but just think when, so does everything. So does your toaster, so does your refrigerator, so does your car, everything. And they're able to slowly whittle away at this quaint idea that you should be afforded some kind of privacy. Your expectation of privacy in your own home, that's an outdated view. And really all that does is it protects the Nazis. That's all it does. You're already seeing rhetoric where they're saying that free speech is a weapon of Nazis. That, free speech is only a tool of the Nazis. And if you support free speech, you're really just trying to have an excuse to be a Nazi, right? You're already seeing that. I saw this happening years and years ago. Years and years ago. I was working with some libertarians, and they did I don't know if you'd call it a study, but it was a survey of tens of thousands. So it wasn't just a small sample. It was a very large sample size of college graduates. And the way that it was, there was a couple of questions in this survey that regarding free speech. And one of the questions, or one of the choices, I guess you could choose, was, the question was, do you think sometimes the First Amendment goes too far? Like free speech goes too far? And that's not the exact wording, but that was the gist of it, right? And we reached over 50% of the respondents said yes. It was something like 56% of the respondents. So it was just barely starting to tip over, right? And these libertarians that I worked with were like, wow, that's crazy. And I told them that, I was like, look, this is not the high watermark. This is just the beginning of where this goes. And they were all very skeptical and thought that I was just being a pessimist. Look, being blackpilled is a burden that I've had to have my whole life. Because most people they don't want to believe. Most people don't want to believe bad news, right? And while I was significantly more white-pilled about other things, in that respect, I saw that number and that terrified me. That terrified me because it was so foreign to the way that I viewed the world. And to think that there'd be 56% of the college kids that are supposed to be really into freedom and free speech and all this sort of a thing, right? When I saw that it had tipped, that 56% of college kids thought that free speech went too far, that it was bad somehow, I knew we were in trouble. And I knew it was just the beginning. That was literally just the beginning. I told a lot of people then that really, I predicted a lot of what was going to happen, and a lot of it's happening. And a lot of those people I was telling this to are still living in a fantasy world. Not all of them, but most of them are still thinking like, well, we can fix this. We just need more free markets and more open borders. That'll fix it. All right, let's take a look here at chat. You guys are talking amongst yourself. Should we send our CWs at full power and send our call signs at very little power? You do what you want. You do what you want. I'm just saying, I'm not going to tell you to do anything illegal. All I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you the frequency that my equipment is going to be listening on for CW. And to make it even less likely that it even works, my receivers are kind of old, so they're going to be probably a little tiny bit off frequency on top of everything else, because I can zero beat them and I can get them really, really close, really close. But like I said, if I have the bandwidth, I won't even use a receiver. If I have the bandwidth, they'll just hook it up to the web SDR. And it'll work a lot better because that receiver is way better and their antenna is way better. And you could probably, look, if I use the web SDR, I can hit that thing with 5 watts and it's copyable, no problem. I can transmit on 5 watts to not that great of an antenna, and I can easily be copied. Do you think the U.S. was always destined to go down this current path, or could we have avoided the situation? Yeah, I think we could have avoided the situation. I just don't think there's not really a whole lot of value in looking back at that unless you're thinking about how you know, if you're in a position of power, which we're not. If we were in a position of power and you wanted to look at how to address the problem that should have been addressed, there's value in looking at it that way. But what's done is done, right? None of the looking back at what caused that problem is only going to help you if you have the power to prevent it from. If you're in a position of power, we're so out of power right now that things like that, it's if you want to satisfy some kind of curiosity you might have about it. I think that the Constitution, if it had been more racially explicit, but you could say that, but I maybe I'm mistaken here, but I'm pretty sure Australia's Constitution was a little more racially explicit, and that didn't help them because eventually what happened, right? You know, I talked about how the Mormon Church, for example, the Mormon Church wouldn't allow black people to have the priesthood. That was explicit in the religion. But in 1978, the boomers changed it, right? And because no constitution, I mean, you can change any constitution. It is literally just a piece of paper. And so if the majority of people don't want to follow it, it kind of, it's meaningless. It's literally meaningless. I mean, it's not like the Constitution is some omnipotent robot that can sense whenever someone violates it, and it can shoot out like a bolt of lightning and punish the person who, as badass as that would be, that doesn't exist. It's literally just a piece of paper. And if the majority of the people stop believing in it, then it's meaningless. It's powerless. There's nothing it can do. So if you are able to subvert the people into believing what they had to believe to sign on for the Immigration Act of 1965 and beyond, there's no law that's going to stop that from happening, because the people will just change the law like they did. There was already laws and regulations in place meant to protect the founding stock Americans, and that was all undone in a synagogue somewhere. I mean, they literally wrote the Immigration Act of 1965 in a synagogue. So, it's more about, it's less about the government and more about the society. It's more about the society should have been immune to that kind of mind virus. But it takes a lot of work. You have to always be ready to combat that kind of mind virus. And if you get complacent, you get lazy, which is what happened. You had especially after World War II, you had a generation that had just went through like the horror of World War II. And the last thing they wanted to do was to discipline their children. And you had at the same time all this money get infused into the country. The spoils of war came rolling in. And then you had it was this perfect storm where you had all these new technologies appear all at the same time. Whether you were talking about birth control, whether you're talking about just the mass media, the television, some of the technologies that maybe weren't directly spreading propaganda, but were eliminating, I guess, thought, like making your life easier in such a way that it was just making the country more decadent. Having all these technologies that were just automating a lot of these processes that used to be something people had to do. And so that's really where we failed. You can look back at the founding fathers and try to put blame on them for not putting something in the Constitution that would have protected us explicitly, but really that's not. I mean, they would have just rewritten that. It wouldn't have really protected you. Really, the failure was the people returning from World War II and their children, and the failure to preserve the culture. And the failure of the culture to survive all this new technology, all the immigrants, because you had also immigrant groups who were actively trying to subvert the culture. You had a stream of Jewish immigrants coming in from Russia since the turn of the century, basically, like the early 1900s, who eventually ran Hollywood and a lot of the television networks. So that, in fact, in many ways, they are the reasons we were in World War II in the first place, right? So they already had enough influence to get us into World War II before World War II, America was even in World War II. And you can say, oh, no, that's not true, Devin. There was Pearl Harbor, whatever. There was a definite concerted effort to get the American people who weren't on board with involvement in World War II, to get them on board with it using the television and radio networks. So that same force, they just increased the numbers because you had all these immigrants come in from mostly Russia, Eastern Europe. So you had Eastern European Jews come in, create Hollywood, create these television networks, create these mass communication industries that would serve their interests. And some of those interests were also to normalize more immigration, right? More of them. So as you had more Jews fleeing Europe and coming to America, that just bolstered their numbers, and it increased their ability to influence people. And then look, like I said, the Immigration Act of 1965 was literally written partially in a synagogue. And that's the people that's who was writing this stuff. That's who made the changes to the society. So I mean, look, and it's not a conspiracy theory. This is just history. And look, historically, Europeans have been the target of these people and have failed to defend themselves against these people. 109 times, like several times. Like this is like a reoccurring thing. This is just like everything else we talk about, where we talk about, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes or it echoes. This is the same thing. This happens over and over again too. This exact dynamic, this dynamic between the Jewish people and the European people has existed for thousands of years. It just has. So this is just another one of these parts of the cycle. And I don't know what to tell you, other than, I mean, if we've been susceptible to this as a people for thousands of years, I don't think there is an easy solution. I think that that's just, for whatever reason, there's an exploit in our firmware, and some people make good use of that. One thinks he is, but he's only just waking up. The other used to be pretty based. We were close growing up. We don't talk much anymore. Oh, you're talking to someone else. When you're at the end of your days, and if consider yourself to have achieved a lot and been successful, what do you think you will have accomplished to bring you to that point? Me personally? For me to think that I've accomplished something? I don't know. I think I've already accomplished, on a personal level, some stuff. Maybe not so much in the macro. In the micro, I've accomplished quite a bit. I'm fully satisfied with my contribution when it comes to the micro. In the macro, I think maybe this is what the later years are for, right? Like, not that I'm super old or anything like that, but like, I'm no longer the starry-eyed youth that I once was, where I was I'm gonna make these huge movies, and like, they're gonna totally change the culture. I'm gonna make the next Star Wars or whatever. There was a time I had big dreams like that, and now my big dreams are totally different and more realistic and probably achievable. I don't know what specifically that'll be, other than if I can somehow prevent my people from being exterminated, that'll be a step in the right direction. Okay, let's take a look here. We need another high trust society. I don't know. I think maybe that's an outdated technology. I think it is, and in fact, I think that might be part of the issue, because I think a lot of what we are nostalgic for is a high trust society. I don't know that a high trust society is a realistic society in current year. Because if you think about it, high trust society, that's what a lot of what people miss, right? It's a lot of what you miss when you think about, when you look at these old black and white photos or films of kids playing outside and being safe and all this sort of a thing. Yeah, like there's some of it that's the aesthetic that you like, and there's some of it, but really when it comes down to it, it's the safety, right? It's the trust. It's the fact that you could play outside and not worry about your kid, getting shot in the drive-by or something like that, right? But I just don't know that that's a realistic expectation for any society to have, as long as transportation is the technology that really what kills that is the ability for to move large numbers of people quickly. The technological advances in transportation are as much to blame for our current situation as anything else. Because you got to think about it. Like, I mean, even these caravans, right? Okay, they show you footage of the caravans rushing through a line of cops somewhere on a border. But don't think that they're actually walking to America from Honduras. They're not. They're not. At the very least, they're hopping on trains, but like they're being helped out by nonprofits who literally load up these people into trucks and truck them hundreds of miles, right? If these people had to literally walk from Honduras all the way to, Texas or wherever they're coming in, you wouldn't have nearly as many, because that's a long ass fucking walk. It's a long ass fucking walk, and it would take them forever, and it would take so many resources. You wouldn't be able to do it. And a lot of these immigrants that we have, not just from south of the border, but even the Asian immigrants, the people, stuffed into shipping containers coming across from China. This technology that's enabled this mass movement of people, that's as much of a problem as anything else. And I don't know that your high trust society can withstand that technology. I don't know that you can, because a lot of what comes with that high trust society is also a lot of empathy. And unless you could implement an extreme, and I mean extreme, an extreme level of in-group preference and negative out-group preference, it's kind of that empathy that people like about white people is a huge vulnerability. Huge vulnerability. Because all it takes is a big boat full of migrants to show up on the shore, and all of a sudden, we can't just turn them back. We have to welcome them in. And it seems like there's no limit to that. It seems like that empathy and that high trust, that like in Sweden, where you'd see these photos of this guy who's like 35, and they're like, oh, look, he's the fastest 12-year-old in Sweden. And it's like some 35-year-old Pakistani guy. That happened because of high trust. That's because they just believe these people. Oh, yeah, high trust, there's another word for that. That's gullible. And so I don't know that high trust societies will do anything but self-destruct with our current technological situation. So I don't know that we can ever return to that. Because if we did, unless you could somehow, like I said, unless you could somehow have like extreme in-group preference to the degree where the average American, or whatever country you're talking about, in my case American, the average American wouldn't just vote for, but would think it was awesome to have like guns on the border, like turrets on the border that were gunning down anyone that tried to come in here. If you had that kind of extreme in-group preference, where everyone thought that sounded based and red-pilled and not horrifying, then it would be great. It'd be great to have that kind of trust, but I think it's just gone. You can't have... high trust can't coexist with low trust third worlders. It can't. It'll be the end of you every time. It'll be exploited every time. And it's a sad thing to think that we might have to fundamentally evolve as a people and lose something that made us good in a lot of ways. Something that made us special. But it might be something that we have to do if we're going to survive these evolutionary pressures being applied right now. Otherwise, you're just going to pass on that problem to the next group. Someone says self-loathing whites are unacceptable. Yeah, I've always thought that people with white guilt, and I think I tweeted this out a while back, that white people with white guilt are more loathsome to me than male feminists. And it's because it's for the same reason. And a lot of it's kind of like what I was talking about too, where you have the conservatives who feel ashamed of their bigoted thoughts, right? They're ashamed, they're embarrassed by the patterns that they have recognized. It's just cowardice. It's cowardice. It's a desire to want to conform to the society at large over conforming to what's right or conforming to what's real. And so obviously, if that's your strategy, you're never going to be able to fight the mob, because you're always going to be trying to assimilate to it. And these people, that's what NPCs do. That's what a lot of these people are. A lot of normie whites have no clue how bad the darkies are, especially in rural areas, unless they have lived near them. Well, that's the thing, is a lot of white people, their exposure to non-whites is through film and media. In the same way that a lot of their exposure to gays, up until really the last decade or so, was the same thing. They didn't know any gay people in their real life. They just knew about the handsome man on Will and Grace. He seems like a normal guy. That was their exposure to gay people. They didn't know anyone gay in their real life. And increasingly I see that, especially with, like you said, with rural whites that they live relatively segregated. Even in my area, right? If I talk about racial issues, which I try to avoid right now, but sometimes can't hold my tongue, you run into the same thing. You realize these people don't have any experience with non-whites. And in fact, a lot of these people, because the media is not, when the BLM riots were taking place, they had no idea that it was even happening. They had no idea. I brought it up to someone casually at one point, like, yeah, it's pretty crazy. They're burning down Minneapolis or whatever, and they had no idea what the fuck I was talking about. A lot of people have no idea that the Summer of Love even happened. They just think that maybe there was a few mostly peaceful protests. That's all they know about. They don't know about all this. They haven't seen all the videos that you see because they get deboosted. And they'll know about it even less as the censorship ratchets up, and it will. It'll ratchet up. And that's just the way that it is. Policy like how building superintendents had to live in the buildings they rented. Leftists have to live with the people they sponsor. I'm not sure what you guys are talking about there. Is your antenna vertically or horizontally polarized? Also, women shouldn't be allowed to vote in high trust societies. Well, mine is, I just have an end-fed dipole for right now. I want to get a better antenna, but I just don't have the time or money. It works fine. It works fine. I just have it up in some trees. Yes, I have trees, not very many. But it works fine. Okay, let's take a look here. Blacks are even more dangerous now that they know they can get away with anything. Well, I mean, look, any group's going to be more dangerous if there's no consequences. And there aren't any consequences. I think it's clear that not only is there no equal protection under the law when it comes to the haves and the have-nots, but that's also, there's a racial component to that too. Well, I mean, just look at the Capitol insurrectionists versus the BLM rioters. I think it's easy to tell. Why live in the desert? I don't know. I like it. I like it. It's not for everybody. I like it. I will rarely, if ever, have to shovel snow. It does snow here occasionally, very, very, very occasionally. And when it does, it melts pretty much immediately when it lands. There actually is some snow on the distant mountaintops near me right now. But in terms of winters, the winters are very mild. Winters are very awesome, actually. The summer's not so much. But there's a good part of the year the weather's great. There's only like there's like 2 months where you're really tired of it. And in some years that might extend into 3 months. But beyond that, and I like the heat. I mean, I don't like again, for 2 of the months I don't like the heat. There is a limit to how much heat I like, but there's just like weird stuff out here. I don't know. It's not for everybody. Someone says, but shovel snakes. Yes, I have shoveled a lot of snakes. The snake, my weapon of choice when it comes to snakes is a shovel. Let's slice them right in half. It gives you plenty of room to not get bit. Dry air is bad for the skin. Well, let's just use lotion. We are having a snowstorm tonight. Yeah, I mean, I like snow, and I like well, let me rephrase that. I like the idea of snow. I don't like actually having to deal with snow. When I lived in Maryland, during the snowpocalypse years ago, or at least that's what they called it. It was basically not that bad. But I got snowed in to my apartment, and me and my girlfriend at the time, it was fun for like a couple days. I think it got old after a while, but like it was kind of fun living in a winter wonderland. And but also I hated how in Maryland, like everything was icy all the time. You always thought you were going to slip and bust your ass somewhere, and it just gets miserable after a while. But in the same way that the heat here gets miserable after a while, there's no place that's perfect. Do you think it's a bad idea to live inside of a town, even in a very rural area? No, it's up to you. It depends on the town. I think that it's best if you have the ability to make your own food. But that's about it. Devin, we need to build a society like Orania, South Africa. Oh, I think I know what you're talking about. That'd be kind of cool. Do I shovel coyotes too? No, you very rarely see coyotes. I saw them on that one ruck march I was telling you guys about. I saw the whole pack of them, and I was a little nervous. And I saw one of them eating a rabbit I had thrown over the fence. But that's the only time I've seen them the whole time I'm out here. They're very sneaky. It is Holocaust Remembrance Day, and anti-Semites are... Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Anti-Semites are short something? Where'd it go? Sorry, your comment just flew away. I don't know what you were saying. When I moved to the desert as a teenager, I was shocked when I saw kids kill rattlesnakes by stepping on their head and off the body. It was funny that when the head didn't come off and the kid was left holding an alive snake and having to chuck it. You can still make your own food in a small town. Yeah, no, you can. Like I said, it all depends on the town. You ever tried dehydrating or pickling cactus for food preservation? Thing about cactus, it's not very high calorie at all. And it's like cucumber, like low calorie. So if you did pickle it or something like that, it would be, I mean, pickles have 0 calories or very close to. So that's one problem. Cactus, the fruit is going to be where you get the calories from. The cactus pads have moisture in them, so it's good for that. And you know, it provides some nutrition, but mostly you want to be making I guess you could dehydrate the fruit. When I harvested the fruit last year, I just made a bunch of juice and a bunch of like jam, and it was pretty good. So what is your main goal? I don't really have a main goal. My main goal is to be happy. How about that? So they sell little packets of mud in some Mississippi convenience stores because there are black people who eat it. I did not know about that. You can starve to death eating rabbits too. They have no fat on them. Yep. What crops can you raise in the desert? Wouldn't it be better to be in a place with more better land like the Midwest? Yeah, to each their own. Like you can grow lots of stuff here. Lots of stuff. You can grow lots of citrus here. You can grow figs here. You can grow, I mean, you can grow most things actually. If inside of a greenhouse, you can pretty much grow anything. Very few crops are going to not. In fact, here's the cool thing about the desert. You have more than one growing season. I mean, you can grow sometimes 2 or 3 crops in the same year because you have sun for so long. And even during the winter is so mild. I've had, just as an example, my artichokes. I planted a bunch of stuff in this hugelkultur mound, and I just randomly threw some seeds to see what would come up. And the artichokes started growing like in November, December. And then by the time spring rolled around, they were pretty big plants. So there's stuff always growing in the desert, especially if you have a greenhouse. So you can grow anything you want out here. The only thing that sucks is if you don't have a well. But most, I've got a well. You can get a well. You ever try getting pumpkins growing? No, I still haven't really attacked the gardening issue to the extent. I'm just trying to get. Part of what I got to do is you do have to fix up your soil a little bit, right? If you want to be able to grow just anything. So a lot of what I've been doing this first year or so that I've been out here is clearing out all the dead plants that were here initially and making kind of like the hugelkultur mounds. So what I did was I dug these big ass trenches And then there was a whole bunch of dead trees in the property, like a whole bunch. And so I sawed them all up into little pieces and, threw them in the trenches. I've got to run a bunch of branches through the wood chipper. So I have wood chips. Wood chips is where it's at, especially if you're in the desert. If you just put in in fact, if you live somewhere close enough to where these tree trimming companies will drive to you, you can just call them up and say, dump all your wood chips on my driveway. And then you just stack your backyard full of wood chips. There's a whole channel. There's a guy in Phoenix. And he's pretty lame, but but he's a good gardener. He's called The Vegan Athlete. It's a YouTube channel. I know. It's exactly what you think it is. But that's exactly what he did is he dug out the dirt in his backyard and put in like 3 feet of wood chips. And now he just has like this amazing garden where everything grows. And I'm doing like a smaller scale of that. I don't have the ability to backhoe 3 feet of my dirt out and all that stuff. I'm just chipping up the wood, but it works. It works. It's pretty easy to fix up your soil if you have access to wood chips or wood. Do you have any suggestions on how to deprogram a person that is totally addicted to the TV and MSM narrative? No, just whittle away at it. It didn't happen overnight, most likely, so it's not going to be able to be fixed overnight. And look, some people are just dumb. Some people are just dumb. You're not going to reach everybody. Some people are just dumb, and dumb people are going to want to side with whatever the prevailing narrative is. No matter how crazy it is, they're going to go with it because they don't have the facilities to determine they're not smart to see the problems with it. All they can see is that, well, everyone else thinks this is a good idea, so I'm going to conform to it because I'm not smart enough to not conform. Like, as a survival mechanism, as a dumb person, I'm going to increase my ability to survive if I just go with the crowd because I'm not smart enough to go against it. I won't survive. So some of that you're just going to be fighting it up. It's like I was saying the other night. Sometimes it's just not worth it. Sometimes, at a certain point, why are you trying to save them if they don't want to be saved? If you plan on living there a long time, you can build a small water retaining walls that trap water longer and slowly makes the soil better. Yeah, no, there's things like that I'm doing. The way that I'm, I guess, irrigating, where I'm trying to, because we'll get these big rains. Like, it won't rain for months and months and months. Sometimes like a scary long time before another rain happens. But when it does rain, it usually rains quite a bit. And if you have, if your soil is just sand, unfortunately, a lot of it's just going to seep in there and then it goes away. Or it evaporates out too quickly, right? Because you might have clay underneath that's going to hold that water in. But then if it's 120 degrees outside, it's just going to evaporate right out the top. But if you put in a bunch of these wood chips on the top and a lot of organic material that's going to hold in that moisture and act as a moisture barrier so it doesn't just evaporate out of the sand, you can hold onto that water a lot longer. And like I said, and you just have to grow plants that aren't going to be susceptible to low water environments. Like so like one of the reasons why there were so many dead trees in the property when I moved here was the people who lived here before me planted all these trees that had no business living in the desert. And so when the old lady died and no one watered them for like a year or two, all the trees died. So you just have to plant trees that are actually going to live, like mesquite trees, stuff like that. You should look into barn dominiums. I think they would appeal to your build-it-yourself style of a home building. Sounds interesting. I'm guessing barns are involved. Do you have snake boots? How many words per minute can your receiver process? I don't have snake boots. I have snake chaps that I do wear when I'm clearing out areas where I think there's going to be rattlesnakes. I don't know. I mean, I've never heard anyone keying CW so fast that this machine couldn't keep up with it. And I mean, like, I've picked up some really fast, like, where it almost just sounds like a blur. It's just like, you know, like faster than probably anyone else is going to be able to really do. I mean, I don't know what the actual words per minute this thing is capable of doing. It doesn't really say anywhere. Maybe the manual does. I mean, this thing's older than I am, or at least as old as I am. It's not exactly high tech. I mean, at the time it was. It also receives TTY, but I've yet to get that to work. Thoughts on using cute memes like Apu to sneak women the red pill? Like Apu from The Simpsons? How would that... Cute memes? Maybe I don't know what Apu you're talking about. I don't know. If someone went to college, I can't win them back. 100% of the time, college is really well run for indoctrination. Yeah, it's really, that's a difficult thing to get past, because not only are you having to get past just the 4 years of indoctrination, there's just a lot of psychological things that go along with that. Like, a lot of people, they have pride in their education, and so they have pride in their own brainwashing, and that's just, you know, increases it to a degree that's even more difficult. So, all right, guys. Well, we have hit the 2-hour mark. And I know it's a little late tonight. I will be much earlier on Thursday. And again, the schedule will be Tuesday. Remember, if you consider tonight, or right now, Tuesday night, which is more kind of Wednesday morning, but if you consider it Tuesday night, it'll be Tuesday nights, Thursday nights, and Saturday nights. And we'll keep that going for now in perpetuity. I'll be a little more prepared next time. I was a little lazy today because I just got back from my couple days of rest where I didn't pay attention to politics really, and I just worked on the homestead, and I got a significant portion of the Simpson video wrapped up, and worked on the book a little bit. So having these days off in between streams will give me time to finish up a lot of that stuff. And also looking at, there's a couple other movies that I want to do reviews of that I have watched recently that really could use. Someone asked that I watch Society. There's this movie, 80s movie called Society. I watched it. A lot weirder than I thought it would be. I'm not sure. I might have to watch it again. Because I watched it while doing stuff, not expecting it to be that weird. And then it was just like really weird. So whoever recommended that, I did watch it. And I'm going to probably have to watch it again. Because it was just like, what the fuck is going on in this movie? So if you've seen that afternoon, good morning, good whatever. For Blackpilled, I am, of course, Devin Stack.
A felon, gangster, mafiotic, negroidic, the Black Frank Gelada, a gangster judge, therefore unprosecutable, the blackish, menial, negroidic in appearance and demeanor, felon, vicious, parroting puppet, ex-district attorney Nassau County, and watch my Frankenstein eyesight television playback of this felonious, lowly, sodomistic display by the felon, sodomist Judge William Sullivan and his lowly felon slut wife during my trial in Nassau County.